All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today we're tackling something I think we all deal with, which is this concept of being busy versus being effective. We're going to build a mental model from first principles to really solve what is, honestly, one of the most universally frustrating puzzles of modern work. If you've ever felt like you're just constantly knocking out tasks, running at absolutely maximum speed, but somehow still just running in place, yeah, you are definitely not alone. You know exactly what I'm talking about here. We've all had those days where you are just totally wiped out from firing off rapid-fire messages, sitting through back-to-back-to-back meetings, and aggressively checking off a dozen minor tasks. The physical fatigue is incredibly real. Yet by the end of the day, there's this gnawing mental frustration because your most critical project, the actual proposal you needed to write or the big strategy you needed to define, it literally hasn't moved a single inch. It's this paradox that trips up even the absolute best of us, leaving us completely drained but wondering where on earth all our time actually went. So why does this happen? Well, this frustrating cycle happens because our brains are fundamentally wired to be tricked. We so easily misinterpret the mere motion of busy work as actual forward movement. When you clear out an inbox, your brain gets an immediate, potent psychological reward, a little hit of dopamine, just for burning energy. Your mind sees a packed calendar and thinks, hey, this system is working perfectly. But here is the core difference we have to internalize. Busy is strictly about the input of energy, while being effective is exclusively about the actual outcome you produce. To really lock this concept in, picture a massive city skyline at night. All those bright lights in the skyscraper windows, they prove there is activity happening everywhere. People are awake, keyboards are clicking, coffee is definitely being poured. But light alone completely fails to tell you if any real, valuable construction is being completed. You can't just look at a lit-up office building and know which floor is actually finishing a masterpiece and which floor is just endlessly reshuffling papers. Activity is highly visible, it's very loud, but true progress is much deeper and often far quieter than that. Let's bring this down to a more personal level. Think about sitting in dead-stop, gridlocked traffic. The engine is revving, pistons are firing, fuel is constantly burning. There is a ton of noise and vibration, making it feel like something significant is happening. But if the car barely moves forward, all of that intense effort is entirely wasted. The fuel just isn't turning into distance traveled. Motion feels deeply meaningful to us in the moment, but it really only matters when it translates into something genuinely useful. Okay, so here's the crucial takeaway. Productivity is not about the sheer volume of tasks you manage to juggle. The productivity formula is actually remarkably simple. Productivity equals useful change divided by the effort spent. It's not about executing a perfect change, and it's definitely not about maximizing your daily activity level to the absolute limit. Every single action needs to be evaluated by what it actually changed in the real world, and whether that specific change was worth the precious effort and time you spent on it. And that brings us to a hidden but truly vital distinction: motion versus progress. Motion is just activity happening. It's a spinning fan. It's attending 3 status update meetings. It's reorganizing your digital folders for the 5th time. Progress, however, means the important outcome is genuinely getting closer to completion. We often use the noise of motion to subconsciously hide from the difficult, intimidating work of making real progress. You can spend all afternoon generating massive amounts of motion, but if the crucial outcome remains untouched, you haven't made progress. Remember, busyness is obvious and loud, but real productivity, it's often entirely invisible. People constantly confuse productivity with speed, but being highly efficient at low-value tasks, it's literally like perfectly, meticulously polishing your shoes without ever actually leaving the house. It's absurd, right? Efficiency only asks how little time or friction was used to complete a task, totally ignoring if the task was worth doing in the first place. Effectiveness, on the completely opposite hand, asks if you created meaningful progress. Effectiveness doesn't care if the process looked messy or slow, and it completely ignores whether you looked busy while doing it. But here's the catch. Even if you completely understand that productivity formula, you still need a deliberate way to direct that rushing river of energy toward what matters most. Effort can be very real and totally well-intentioned, but without prioritization, it scatters in 100 different directions. Think of it this way. If productivity is the powerful engine generating all of your daily force, prioritization is the steering wheel making sure you are actually driving toward your intended destination. Without the steering wheel, a powerful engine just crashes faster. Without strong prioritization, everything feels equally important. We so easily fall into the trap of doing whatever is loudest or easiest rather than what is genuinely valuable.
Just look at how different types of tasks actively mislead us. Urgency measures how soon something asks for attention, but it constantly tricks us about whether the task actually matters in the big picture. Importance measures how much a task affects long-term outcomes, but it rarely feels pressing right now, so we tend to ignore it. Ease tells us how little friction a task has, tricking us into thinking it's worth doing just because it's quick. And finally, visibility measures how obvious a task is to our peers or boss, which completely fakes the creation of real value. When we don't steer, we just react to these illusions. So think of prioritization not as some rigid, punishing script, but more like a choice architecture. It's about designing your environment and your rules so you naturally default to the right things. Imagine walking into the Louvre in Paris. You wouldn't just look at whatever painting happens to be closest to the entrance and wander aimlessly from room to room, right? No, you plan a deliberate route to ensure you see the masterpieces. Prioritization acts exactly like that mapped route through a museum, ensuring your limited daily energy isn't wasted on aimless wandering. So, how do you actually find the masterpieces in your own workday? Well, you use the simple test of strong priority. Highly effective work often looks incredibly quiet on the surface, but it acts as a skeleton key that fundamentally changes everything that follows. When looking at a task, ask yourself, does this remove uncertainty for my team? Does it unblock a bottleneck and open up other work? Will tackling this difficult conversation today prevent weeks of future problems and drift? Does it create leverage, where 1 hour of work today saves 10 hours later? A true priority might just be making one single hard decision, but it permanently moves the final outcome closer.
Ultimately, applying this mental model empowers a massive identity shift. It transforms you from an anxious task filler into a calm, strategic value driver. And listen, this is a tough transition because a task filler is biologically addicted to the quick dopamine feedback of checking off boxes and reacting to immediate demands. It feels really good to clear the slate. But a value driver, they intentionally tolerate the discomfort of delaying those easy wins. They are totally willing to sit in ambiguity and silence, choosing their actions based purely on actual value, rather than the fleeting comfort of momentum. These three core concepts, they fit together seamlessly, just like mechanical gears in a clock. If one gear is missing, the whole system breaks down. You might have immense energy, but you won't have a clear filter for your daily efforts. First, busy creates the initial motion, the raw energy. Then, productivity ensures that motion effectively turns into a useful change. Finally, prioritization steps in as the master gear to choose exactly which useful change matters first. It's a complete interlocking system designed specifically for protecting your most valuable asset, your attention. Bringing it all back to that skyline analogy from the beginning, it is time to stop being so impressed by the bright lights of pure motion. As the saying goes, effectiveness is not just doing work well. It is choosing the right work before doing it well. True effectiveness starts way before the real work even begins. You can absolutely be the hardest worker in the entire room, sweating over the details, but if your ladder is leaning against the wrong wall, every single step you take just gets you to the wrong place faster. So, as you sit down and look at your calendar tomorrow morning, I want you to step entirely out of the noise. Look past the intoxicating busyness of all those unread notifications and ask yourself this single, perspective-shifting question. Don't ask if your day is full. Don't ask if you're working fast enough. Ask, what is this effort actually producing? Because the exact moment you demand a real answer to that question, you stop hiding in busyness and you finally start building something that matters.